In the scorching heart of the Thar Desert, buried under the relentless sun and endless waves of sand, stood a fortress unlike any other. Not a relic of war or a monument of glory, but a prison. A prison whispered about in fear, even by criminals hardened by a lifetime behind bars. Its name, Kar Fortress Penitentiary. It was a place built to hold nightmares, built not just with concrete and steel, but with paranoia. Electric fences buzzed 24 hours a day. Towers with snipers marked every corner. Surveillance drones circled above like hawks. The walls were 30 feet high, embedded with motion sensors. No one had ever escaped. No one had ever tried. Until he arrived, Ramiz Khan. To the outside world, he was a ghost in the machine. A man whose face was known only in courtroom sketches and grainy security footage. A criminal so brilliant, so precise, and so cold-hearted that entire governments had whispered his name in closed-door meetings. His crimes weren't crimes of passion or desperation. They were masterworks of planning, psychology, and manipulation. They called him the architect, not just of theft, but of chaos. He had brought down a national stock exchange with 3 keystrokes. He rerouted weapons shipments from military bases to rebel groups without ever stepping outside. He had orchestrated 5 simultaneous bank heists across 3 countries, and not one shot was fired. His mind was a weapon. And now, that weapon was locked away in Cell 47, deep in the underground wing of Kar Fortress, where the worst of the worst were buried alive in concrete silence. No windows, no contact, no mistakes. His cell had triple-reinforced steel doors, pressure-sensitive floors, and biometric scanners on both entry points. Cameras watched him from every angle. He was under 24/7 surveillance. 2 guards stood outside his cell around the clock, changed every 6 hours without fail. Even his food was delivered through a double-locked chute, untouched by human hands. To the world, it was over. Ramiz Khan, the criminal mastermind feared on 5 continents, was finally caged. But what no one understood was this. You don't cage a mind like Ramiz Khan. You only delay it. Even as guards celebrated his arrest and politicians claimed victory on the news, Ramiz sat silently in his cell, eyes fixed on the corner where the ceiling camera blinked in rhythm. He was already planning, already calculating, every breath, every step, every weakness in the system around him. He did not rant, he did not complain, he asked for no favors. His calm was terrifying. The warden, Colonel Harris, a battle-hardened man who had run the prison for over 2 decades, once said, "I've stared into the eyes of murderers, bombers, even warlords, but that man in Cell 47, he doesn't look at you, he reads you." Staff avoided prolonged contact with him, not by rule, but by instinct. Even the toughest guards found excuses to shorten their rounds near Cell 47. There was something in his silence, something in his stillness, that made your skin crawl. As if he wasn't locked in there with you, you were locked in with him. Outside, the desert burned endlessly. Inside, time ticked slowly. But in the shadows of Cell 47, a plan had already begun to take shape. One so bold, so absurd, it would seem impossible. And yet, when you're dealing with Ramiz Khan, impossible is just another lie. It began with a cough. At first, no one paid attention. Prisoners faked illness all the time, and in a place like Kar Fortress, sympathy was in short supply. The guards noted it in the daily log and moved on. But by the end of the week, Ramiz Khan's cough had turned into wheezing. He staggered during routine cell checks. He vomited twice during meals. His skin began to pale. The medical staff were called in. They performed a standard examination under tight security. Blood pressure, irregular, breathing, labored. He had lost weight. Still, the blood work revealed nothing abnormal. The lead prison doctor chalked it up to prison stress and recommended observation. But the symptoms didn't stop. They escalated. A week later, Ramiz collapsed during morning roll call. Cameras caught him convulsing, foaming at the mouth. A siren blared. Emergency lights flashed. Medics stormed into Cell 47 and carried him out on a stretcher, shackled at the wrists and ankles. The moment was chaotic. Guards were focused on procedure. No one questioned what they were seeing. They only saw what they expected to see: a dying prisoner, too sick to be dangerous. He was transferred to the prison hospital wing, a sterile facility within the same compound but slightly less secure. Here, there were windows, fewer cameras, fewer guards, just enough to feel safe, and just enough to make a mistake. But Ramiz Khan never left anything to chance. In the hospital wing, he behaved like a man on the edge of death. He coughed blood, twitched in bed, and stared blankly at the ceiling like he no longer knew where he was. The doctors believed it. The guards believed it. Even the prison warden, who never trusted anyone, signed off on round-the-clock medical care. Only Ramiz knew the truth. He wasn't dying, he was acting, and every second bought him time. That's when he met Faizan Shah. Bedridden, skeletal, and barely able to speak, Faizan was a forgotten man, a terminally ill inmate who had been serving a life sentence for over a decade. No visitors, no family, no future. He had weeks to live. Ramiz saw him and knew instantly this was his way out. He began to talk to Faizan, slowly, patiently. At first the dying man ignored him, but Ramiz had a way of speaking that made you listen. He offered him water. He read to him. He made him laugh, even in pain. In time, Faizan began to open up. Ramiz told him he wasn't the monster people believed. He told him stories, some true, some not, about injustice, betrayal, and the corrupt elite who had used him and then discarded him. He painted himself as a man framed, misunderstood, and thrown into a cage for what others had done. Then came the offer. "Faizan," he said one night, his voice calm, "you're going to die here, alone, forgotten. But what if, in your last days, you could become something greater? What if the world remembered your name, not as a prisoner, but as a legend?" Faizan looked at him, hollow-eyed. "What are you talking about?" "A trade," Ramiz said, leaning closer. "You pretend to be me, just for a while. Lie still, say nothing. And in return, your name will live in headlines. You'll die as Ramiz Khan, the most wanted man in the world." At first, Faizan thought he was mad, but then he listened, and the more he listened, the more it made sense. Faizan had nothing to lose, and Ramiz had everything to gain. The plan had begun. Faizan Shah lay motionless in the hospital bed, bandages wrapped around his face and hands. Tubes ran from his arms to monitors that beeped in steady rhythm. He looked like any other critically ill inmate, pale, frail, and forgotten. Except he wasn't Faizan anymore. In the official records of Khar Fortress, that bed now belonged to Ramiz Khan. The switch had been subtle, yet absolute. Ramiz had paid dearly to make it happen. Not with cash. Cash was useless in prison, but with access, secrets, digital keys, the kind of information that could erase gambling debts, unlock foreign accounts, or destroy lives. He found 3 men, 1 nurse, 1 security guard, and 1 junior doctor. Each had something to hide. Each thought they were the only one involved, and each had been given just enough incentive and just enough fear to stay quiet. It began with falsified patient files. Lab reports were swapped, biometric logs tampered, camera loops overwritten with silent footage of Faizan's real deterioration, doctored to appear as Ramiz's. Every night, the nurse would gently sedate Faizan and dress his face with surgical gauze, using infection protocols as an excuse. The doctor signed off on the treatments. The guard looked the other way. Meanwhile, Ramiz disappeared. He moved through the hospital wing during the night, shaved his beard, trimmed his hair, altered his posture. He wore Faizan's ID tag. He practiced his voice. He wore a medical mask. He even began coughing at the right intervals. A week later, the hospital quietly transferred Faizan, now Ramiz, back to cell 47. That was the masterstroke. Everyone believed the sick man being wheeled in was Ramiz Khan returning from treatment, his face still bandaged, his body weak. The guards noted his return but didn't dare question the process. After all, official documents confirmed it. Medical staff confirmed it. Cameras showed the transition. None of them realized they were watching a dying decoy. Faizan, confused and dazed under sedation, was now the most closely watched prisoner in the country. Every day, guards walked past cell 47, saw a still figure lying on the cot, connected to a heart monitor. None of them noticed that his breathing was slowing, that he barely moved. They didn't want to notice, because to question it would be to question the entire system. And in Car Fortress, the system was never wrong. Meanwhile, Ramiz slipped deeper into his new identity. As Faizan, he was transferred to a hospice ward within the prison for inmates on end-of-life care. Here, security was minimal. Records showed that Faizan Shah was in critical condition, awaiting approval for palliative transfer to a civilian hospital. A few weeks later, the final piece fell into place. A thunderstorm swept across the desert, rare, violent, and chaotic. Lightning knocked out the prison's backup systems for 3 minutes. In that tiny window of darkness, Ramiz walked out of Car Fortress hidden inside an ambulance, escorted by a nurse who had been paid to look the other way, and a forged transfer order signed by a doctor who had already fled the country. By dawn, the ambulance was reported as delayed. Hours later, Faizan Shah was marked as discharged. No red flags were raised. The real Ramiz Khan had vanished. Back in cell 47, Faizan died a week later. No one noticed. His death was logged as a natural result of disease. His body was cremated the next day. The ashes were discarded into the desert wind. No questions, no flags, because the system believed Ramiz Khan was already dead, or rather, still alive, lying in that cell. The illusion was perfect. For the next 11 months, Car Fortress continued its routine. Guards walked past cell 47, nodded at the silent man on the bed, and checked the logs. A few even spoke to him, receiving only groans or blank stares in return. They shrugged. They assumed he was drugged, sick, dying. Why would they suspect anything else? The legend of Ramiz Khan remained intact. He had fooled the most secure prison in the country. He had manipulated men, machines, and protocol, and now he was free, building a new life with a new face and a new name. But the truth, like smoke, doesn't stay hidden forever. And when it surfaced, it would hit like a bomb. 1 year later, the desert wind howled outside the steel walls of Car Fortress, just as it always had. Inside, the same cold routines repeated: roll calls, meal distributions, guard shifts, and surveillance checks. Nothing had changed, or so everyone believed. Until the audit team arrived. It was routine, or it was supposed to be. Every year, a government-ordered biometric re-verification was conducted in high-security prisons across the country. A team of forensic officers, security analysts, and identity experts would scan every prisoner, reconfirm fingerprints, iris patterns, and voice signatures. Not because anyone suspected anything, just because the system demanded it. It was meant to take 3 days. It took 2 hours for everything to collapse. The biometric technician walked into cell 47 with a portable scanner. The prisoner inside, silent, sunken-eyed, barely moving, gave no resistance as the machine scanned his fingertips. Beep. Match error. The technician frowned. Probably a dry fingerprint. He moistened the finger, tried again. Beep. No match found. A murmur passed through the hallway. The technician called his superior. They tried another method. Retinal scan. Iris mismatch. Identity not verified. Now the alarms began to ring, not physically, but procedurally. The warden was called. Extra guards arrived. The prisoner on the bed, thin, pale, half sedated, stared at them blankly, too weak to speak. His voice recognition failed too. Colonel Harris, the veteran warden, stared at the biometric screen, blinking in disbelief. "This is impossible," he muttered. But the computer didn't care. The man in cell 47 was not Ramiz Khan. The fortress erupted into chaos. Orders were shouted over radios. Security logs were pulled. Surveillance footage from the last 12 months was re-watched at double speed. Every detail was re-examined. And suddenly, the gaps appeared like cracks in a dam. There had been no recorded movements from Ramiz Khan in months, only footage of a still body in bed. Most of it was automated, looped, or too dark to confirm identity. The guards had trusted the schedule. The cameras had trusted the logs. The logs had trusted the humans. And the humans had trusted their fear of Ramiz Khan to keep them distant. No one had truly looked at him in nearly a year. The cremation logs were reviewed. Files of Faizan Shah were pulled from the archives. And then, like a blade through the fog, the realization landed. Ramiz Khan had escaped, a year ago, without a trace. By sundown, news reached the Ministry of Internal Security. By nightfall, a red alert was issued. Military intelligence was notified. A Level 1 manhunt was activated nationwide. But it was too late. Ramiz had vanished like a shadow at dawn. No money trail, no digital footprints, no facial matches at borders. Every trace of him had been wiped clean. He hadn't just escaped prison. He had escaped identity itself. Inside the prison, panic turned into fury. Interrogations began. The nurse, the doctor, the guard, all missing. Warden Harris was suspended. The entire administration was thrown into an internal investigation. Careers collapsed overnight. Families were dragged into the media frenzy. The press had a field day. Mastermind escapes fortress. For a whole year, no one noticed. Inside the great prison vanishing. Ramiz Khan, ghost or genius? For the public, it was a thrilling scandal. For the government, it was humiliation. For the security establishment, it was a nightmare. But somewhere far from the noise, in a quiet villa perched along the coast of another continent, a man watched the news with a glass of wine in his hand. Clean-shaven, dressed in a tailored suit, he looked nothing like the man once known as Ramiz Khan. But when he smiled, it was unmistakable. The architect had won. Again. The aftermath hit like an earthquake. Within 48 hours of the discovery, Khar Fortress was sealed off. No one in, no one out. The government dispatched an emergency panel of intelligence officers, forensic auditors, and high-level security agents. Helicopters hovered over the compound. Armed trucks lined the roads. It no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a crime scene. The national media rolled out 24-hour coverage. Every news anchor, every online influencer, every political commentator had one name on their lips: Ramiz Khan. It wasn't just that he had escaped. It was how. Silently, without force, without violence, without leaving even a hair behind. He had walked out of the most secure facility in South Asia, and the system had clapped for him on the way out. Politicians scrambled. Accusations flew. How could this happen? Who was responsible? How many were involved? Warden Colonel Harris was the first to fall. After 23 years of flawless service, he was arrested for negligence and procedural failure. During his interrogation, he broke down. He couldn't explain it. He had trusted the files, the logs, the protocols, but none of those could detect a ghost in plain sight. The nurse and the junior doctor who had assisted in the escape were gone. Passports flagged, families questioned. Their homes were empty. One of them had last been seen boarding a private boat near Karachi. The other was traced to Dubai, but then gone again, vanished into the wind like the man they had helped. Even lower-rank guards were pulled into intense questioning. Every missed detail, every unchecked anomaly, every moment of blind trust now looked like conspiracy. Some were fired, some jailed, others simply disappeared into obscurity, their names forever tied to the greatest prison embarrassment the country had ever seen. The Ministry of Internal Security published a classified report titled Project Phantom, a code name for the internal hunt for Ramiz Khan. It admitted, off the record, that there were no leads, no digital traces, no safe houses, no contacts. He had erased himself completely. But in truth, Ramiz hadn't vanished. He had evolved. In a villa nestled in the quiet cliffs of southern Spain, under a new name and a surgically altered face, he watched it all unfold. News clippings on his desk, video reels of panicked officials, financial reports showing stocks of private security firms dropping overnight. He sipped espresso and chuckled. Not at their failure, but at their predictability. He had already built a new identity. Alejandro Ruiz, a Chilean-born software investor with a passion for architecture. The irony amused him. With a fake history 10 years deep, a Swiss bank account, and a biometric profile stolen from a deceased foreign national, he was untouchable. He was even registered as a part-time university lecturer in Barcelona, teaching advanced logic. They weren't even looking for the right man anymore. The world, meanwhile, debated the philosophical implications of his escape. Was he a criminal genius, or a system hacker exposing a flawed institution? Some called him a menace. Others, a modern-day Houdini. Online forums turned him into a myth. Conspiracy channels fed theories by the hour. Ramiz Khan had become more than a man. He was now a legend, but legends don't rest. Despite his new life, Ramiz never stopped calculating. Every day, he read intelligence blogs, watched government contracts, observed digital vulnerabilities in private prisons, surveillance systems, and national databases. He wasn't done. He was planning something else. Not to destroy, but to prove a point, that no cage could hold a man who understood how cages were built. Back in Car Fortress, Cell 47 was sealed permanently. No one else would ever occupy it. A blank plaque outside the door read, "This cell held a man, and lost him to his own mind." But those who knew better, the ones who had stared into Ramiz Khan's eyes, understood the truth. He had never been imprisoned at all. They had simply given him a puzzle, and he solved it.